Vladimir Putin has changed everything with this snap visit, as it has been called, or a rare visit, should we call it, from the Russian president to the Middle East. It only lasted about one single day total, and Vladimir Putin made his first stop to the United Arab Emirates. Then he headed to Saudi Arabia to meet with Mohammed bin Salman. Now he is in Iran. As of December 7th, he is in Iran speaking with the president, Raisi, in Moscow. And this rounds out what the Western mainstream media, the United States, the unipolarists are going crazy about. The fact that Vladimir Putin is not really sticking it in the eye of the collective West. What he's doing is he's demonstrating that Russia is indeed not isolated, that the calculus in the region of West Asia, amid this horrific assault that Israel is waging with the complete and total aid of the United States and unconditional solidarity of the United States, that Russia is a significant player in this region, if not a more influential player now than the United States in many respects, diplomatically, politically, and more and more so economically. So that is a game changer. That is something that has been happening quietly around and surrounding some of the other developments we've been talking about so much here and elsewhere. The Ukraine conflict, the war that is escalating and just absolutely out of control in Gaza. These developments kind of cloud a growing reality in the region as a whole. That is that the United States is losing an immense amount of ground by the day, by the month, and by the year. So Vladimir Putin made what has been called a snap visit by the collective West in a bid, they claim, to humiliate Joe Biden, to show, as Business Insider says here, but you can find this in basically every mainstream media outlet, comments on how Vladimir Putin seeks to humiliate Biden by showing that attempts to isolate Russia have failed. Now, certainly there is an equation. This does factor into the equation. It does factor into the equation that the United States has failed to isolate Russia, and that can be seen in all spheres, especially in relation to the sanctions regime that was imposed upon Russia. That has failed, and if that has failed, that means every other effort, including the attempt to mire Russia into a military quagmire in Ukraine, has also failed. So here you have the Business Insider, a pretty stable and reliable voice of the elite, the neocons, the Western ruling elite, ruling class, if we would. This is what they had to say. They said Russian President Vladimir Putin is making a rare trip. And of course, that peppered all the headlines in the Western mainstream media. Rare. He'll visit the UAE and Saudi Arabia, which he has already done. Putin is seeking to show attempts to isolate him over Ukraine have failed. And so this is what's interesting. They talk about how Putin's, only months ago, Putin's grip on power appeared to be loosening. The Russian president faced a coup from Wagner. Now, of course, we know that was overblown and not nearly any kind of threat to Russia's political stability. But at the same time, they say he was battling spiraling domestic economic woes caused by sanctions imposed in punishment for the Ukraine invasion. It was subject of an arrest warrant internationally over alleged war crimes by his forces. So again, as I said, the sanctions have failed. So there was no woes. There might have been a temporary hiccup, but it was so brief that it really didn't register. You couldn't really measure how badly it affected Russia because of how quickly they were able to pull themselves back up again and, in fact, surpass the expectations of anybody, maybe even Russia itself. But, of course, this other development, Vladimir Putin being issued an arrest warrant by the ICC, was also irrelevant because guess who isn't even a signatory to the ICC? The United States, which is the principal force seeking the overthrow of Vladimir Putin himself. So it was always a big nothing burger. But here the Western mainstream media loves to try to play up that Vladimir Putin was in somehow trouble over his policy decision and that of the Kremlin's around Ukraine or any other issue. But the Russian president is clawing back. He is making a rare trip to the Middle East as he seeks to embarrass Biden by showing him that attempts to isolate Russia have failed. So he went to the UAE, went to Saudi Arabia, two of the US's closest allies in the Middle East. It's among the first trips he's made abroad since the arrest warrant of March 2023 by the ICC, with neither of the Gulf states signatories of the convention, which the United States also isn't. Analysts told Business Insider that he would use a visit to try to drive a wedge between Washington and the Arab states and expose the limits of U.S. power, saying that he's exploiting rage over U.S. support for Israel. So here we have this attempt to show that Putin's government is reacting to the carnage in Gaza in ways that serve to boost Russia's soft power in the Arab Islamic world, while taking advantage of the opportunity to have international attention shift away from Ukraine. So all of this is seen as nefarious. Well, how do the Arab countries, how the UAE and Saudi Arabia, how did they react to his visit? And I have some great footage. First, let's see how the United Arab Emirates welcomed Vladimir Putin. Now, if this is Putin's attempt, all on his own, to wrestle away, I'm going to play this on silent because there is a really dramatic song, but I'll make some commentary instead because the music can get kind of tricky on these videos. But the point here is that Vladimir Putin is supposedly the one who is trying to show the world and is trying to take advantage and exploit issues that the United States is having. Well, the UAE or any other country for that matter doesn't really have any there's no gun being held to their head saying they have to show a certain degree of respect or anything or treat Vladimir Putin differently than any other leader. But nonetheless, here you have, watch this. Here you have the UAE. This is how they welcomed Vladimir Putin. So there you have the flags very high on the embassy. There you have the jet. You had Su-35s, by the way, escorting Vladimir Putin to his destinations, which was noted in the Western mainstream media. And it really was, that was a message to the United States and the collective West that Putin is not only well aware that he is a marked man, but he's also well aware that he can and Russia can defend themselves. So here we go. So there you have Vladimir Putin being given the hero's welcome. You have literally a red carpet being rolled out for him as his jet arrives. This was a really big event. One where he was approached by top UAE officials as he got off the plane. And of course, this was made into a spectacle, rightfully so, because what Russia is doing and what these countries are doing are showing that they are not. There is the carpet they are walking. It's not red, but it might as well be. This is how he was treated. This was a celebratory moment, basically treated like royalty. All right. And so that's how he was treating the UAE. They are very strong partners, these two countries, especially given their energy importance. So that's just the first example. Now, there's really interesting videos going around when Vladimir Putin went to Saudi Arabia. So here is Vladimir Putin and Mohammed bin Salman. Look at this greeting here. Have a very warm handshake, to say the least. And then you had the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia during the visit. As he approached, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia put on a 6-minute video. A 6-minute video. I'm not going to play all 6 minutes, but here's a 6-minute video of Vladimir Putin coming to Saudi Arabia. And this was the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry posting a video about it. So here you have him being greeted by Mohammed bin Salman, cameras, hero's welcome. You have the limo, of course, and then you have him entering Riyadh, the Capitol building, and you have very friendly and warm imagery being taken here. No animosity. that this really is a message. This is a message being sent. He is being treated like a hero, like someone who is worthy of respect. And now, this, as you can see, is in marked contrast to the awkward 2022 visit by Joe Biden, where he gave a fist bump of all things. I believe it was 2022, early 2023, where he gave a fist bump to Mohammed bin Salman. It was incredibly awkward. Talks were incredibly cold. And of course, the relations between Saudi Arabia and the United States have been in free fall. So here you just have the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia highlighting all of the major points, all of the respect that they are showing to Vladimir Putin. And this really is a message by all parties involved. Of course, it's a message from Russia that it isn't isolated. Russia has a huge part to play in this region, but it's also a message to from the Middle East, from Saudi Arabia, from the UAE, these two staunch U.S. historic allies now in BRICS. It's a message to the United States that they can't be bullied just because they have strong relations, okay? And here is what Al-Mayadeen had to say, that Putin was in Riyadh after the UAE in a snap one-day visit to the region. He arrived in Saudi Arabia for a sudden visit, engaging in urgent discussions with Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, which covered a range of topics such as the Israeli war in Gaza and Ukraine. So he arrived from the UAE and was only visiting the two countries for one day before he meets with Iran. And Putin said, we have stable relations in all fields of political cooperation, the economy, and humanitarian fields, Putin said to Mohammed bin Salman, adding, it's very important for all of us now to exchange information and assessments about what is happening in the region. The preparations for a summit in Russia have changed, but nothing will stop cooperation, according to Putin. The Middle East circumstances would improve as a result of Saudi Arabia and Russia's political collaboration, said Mohammed bin Salman. Thanks to political coordination between Russia and Saudi Arabia, security in the Middle East has been strengthened. Our subsequent political coordination and interaction will undoubtedly have a positive impact on the global situation in the entire Middle East, he said. Putin was heading a delegation including high-ranking officials from various fields: oil, economy, foreign affairs, space, and nuclear energy. Meanwhile, according to the Kremlin, the agenda of discussions of the two countries included oil, the Israeli war on Gaza, the situation in Syria and Yemen, regional stability, in addition to developments in Ukraine, as well as oil prices. So it's a pretty big deal, and the reception to Putin is also a pretty big deal. And of course, I think it's really important to highlight first, before we get to Iran, that the situations between Russia and the United States couldn't be any more different when it comes to how they approach this region, West Asia, the Middle East, whatever you want to call it, West Asia more accurately, given that the Middle East is just the map that the West drew up when it was carving up the region. But the two circumstances couldn't be any different. Vladimir Putin and Russia support stability. They support peace. They also support a Palestinian state. And thus, their political ideals align with all countries and all peoples of that region far more than the United States, which, of course, has been doing the exact opposite, supporting instability, chaos, and supporting not self-determination for Palestinians, but the onslaught, the expansionism, and the settler treachery and travesty that is Israel. So here is a demonstration of this. You have, for example, Vladimir Putin. He gave this talk, early on at the end of October in his response to what was going on in Gaza with relation to Israel's onslaught. And here's what he had to say in terms of supporting a full-fledged state of Palestine and also condemning the West's treatment of this issue. Here we go.
Like it when someone tells or acts not in accordance with their wishes. They only believe in their own exceptionalism. They believe that they can do anything. They do not want durable peace at the Holy Land. They need chaos in the Middle East. That's why they are discrediting those countries that insist on the immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, insisting on stopping the bloodshed. and are willing to make a practical contribution in the resolving this.
So what Putin is saying is that the United States, the West, they do not support stability. They do not support peace. They do not do what is required to ensure that the interests of the region are placed in the forefront.
Crisis, not trying to gain from this. Even the UN, the clearly stipulated position of the global community, is attacked and bullied and being discredited. I would like to emphasize this. In our approaches to the situation in the Middle East, unlike the Western stance, we have never had any wish to gain anything from that. We have always clearly stipulated our position, declared our position, and it hasn't changed across the years. We stand for the establishment of the full-fledged Palestinian state.
So they Russia stands for a Palestinian state. Of course, most countries aren't going to deviate from international law, from the UN Charter, and from the resolutions that declare that the two-state solution is indeed the correct trajectory for the Palestinian and the Palestinian question, regardless of its limitations, which many viewers here, and of course many viewers who will come to see this, will object to. But the point is that Russia is the one adhering to international law and doesn't seek to gain from the chaos that the United States and the collective West are responsible for sowing. And that is a huge difference. That is a huge difference, because now the region, I mean, look what's happening. It's not a coincidence that Vladimir Putin is visiting Saudi Arabia and then going to Iran. There has been a huge shift in this region away from U.S. domination and hegemony and toward a Russia and China-led multipolar world. And this visit is a huge part of that. So here is Lloyd Austin to mark this difference, okay? Talking about strategic defeat for Israel. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it shows not just perhaps the perilous position that the United States finds itself in with its unconditional support for the absolute criminality, war criminality of Israel, but it also demonstrates that the United States understands that its position is weakening vis-a-vis such support. So here we go.
This kind of a fight, the center of gravity is the civilian population. And if you drive them into the arms of the enemy, you replace a tactical victory with a strategic defeat. So I have repeatedly made clear to Israel's leaders that protecting Palestinian civilians in Gaza is both a moral responsibility and a strategic imperative. This kind of a fight.
So, I mean, of course, that's a bunch of garbage because, first of all, Lloyd Austin, the United States military brass, certainly have no qualms about mass murder of civilian populations, and certainly understand, if there's any truth to this, they understand what it's like to make such grave tactical errors that it leads to strategic defeat. We could look at Vietnam, Afghanistan. We can go down the line where the United States' absolute cruelty and mass murder and destruction of regime after regime, government after government, nation after nation has proliferated and catalyzed massive resistance to it. And that is just the law of politics. And it's the law of war. The law of war is that if there is a more powerful force that is seeking to exploit and destroy and dominate, sure, you are going to get a massive amount of resistance to it. So Lloyd Austin there, though, I think is indicating a more important point in that you have the United States desperately trying to lecture Israel about protecting civilian population because it understands, I think everyone in the world at this point understands, except maybe for Israel, that what it is doing is actually going to lead not to some kind of victory, but a massive and monumental defeat, not just in the court of public opinion, but in terms of the future of the kind of state that Israel is. It is not historic. It is not historically unprecedented for a regime that marks itself as a settler colonial regime, one that is about several decades, if not a century, outdated in terms of what is acceptable to the Western ruling elite at this time, that such a regime may not make it through in perpetuity. It will not be a permanent. It will not exist in permanence because of its behavior, because of its cruelty, because of its policies. I mean, this is something the United States knows very well. This is an issue the United States knows a lot about, given that it has a long history of the same kind of cruelty in just a different context, both at home and abroad. So the United States' position is waning because this is who the United States has to rely upon. The United States has not done what Russia did. Blinken tried. Was Blinken treated the same way? Did Blinken get a carpet rolled out for him? Were there videos showing for example, the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia, 6-minute videos of celebrations and royal treatment for Antony Blinken? No. Did Joe Biden go? No. This shows where the United States is. The United States, if it can't lecture and it can't bully, if there aren't ears to listen and there aren't leaders willing to capitulate, then the United States is really in no position of power at all. Of course, these countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia still have strong relationships with the United States, but the fact that they're even willing to move so much closer to Russia like they have here indicates that there are big problems for the United States in the Middle East, especially when it comes to this absolute crime being committed in Gaza, this rolling war crime. So I want to show you now just a bit of coverage on Iran, because that is the last stop. Here's the Jerusalem Post. And this is, I think, a good, if there's anything about Zionists and Zionism in Israel to remember, it's that Zionism really is, for whatever you think of it, abhorrent or you love it. I mean, for me, I believe Zionism is truly an evil ideology. But no matter what you think of it, it is really an honest expression of the collective West. Zionism is not detached. It's not some special thing. It is an honest expression of what horrors come out of the collective West. And here you have the Jerusalem Post covering Russia's visit to Iran. Iran's visit to Russia, President Raisi's visit to Moscow, in a very honest way, how the collective West really sees it. So it says Iranian president heads to Moscow. Russia state media said that Iran and Russia's presidents intend to discuss trade and economic cooperation, while Iran's pro-regime media highlights Gaza as an important subject. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi is heading to Moscow, and so the meeting will come in the wake of Putin's trip to the UAE and Saudi Arabia. As such, Russia will have done an important outreach to numerous countries in the region. According to the Russian media, the Iranian leader is going to Moscow to discuss trade and cooperation. Iran also supplies Russia with drones and defense ties important to the two countries. Gaza is an important subject in the Russia-Iran talks, Iran's pro-regime Tansim media said. Russian President Vladimir Putin will hold talks in Moscow with President of the Islamic Republic, Ibrahim Raisi, who will arrive in Russia on a working visit, said Russian state media. It's planned to substantively consider the current bilateral cooperation with the focus on implementation of promising joint projects in trade and economic areas, including transport and energy. So historic regional allies, it says Russia and Iran leaders met September 2022 in Uzbekistan during the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. Russia and China both oppose the U.S. and seek to leverage forums such as the SCO and BRICS, the Association of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, to work against the West. So here is the Jerusalem Post saying what usually is the quiet part very loudly. It's saying that multipolarity is indeed the threat here to the West, and this meeting represents that. Other countries in the region are also seeking closer ties with Russia, Iran, and China. Turkey, which also works with Moscow and Tehran, also opposes the West and has frequently bashed Israel in the wake of the October 7th attack. These countries have not condemned Hamas as well, with Iran openly backing this genocidal terrorist group. Therefore, these meetings have increased potential ramifications for Israel as well as Russia's war in Ukraine. That might not say anything very substantively, but what you can read between the lines through that, especially that last sentence, that last statement, is that what Israel sees here is Russia's move toward the Middle East as possibly threatening the US and the West, which is completely backing its reign of terror in Gaza and, of course, surrounding Palestinian territories. And that this is a big problem because they haven't sufficiently condemned terrorism and Hamas and all of this, that this is showing itself to be a troublesome alliance and will have ramifications, says the Jerusalem Post, which is a mouthpiece of the Israeli government. So huge visit, and here are the results. Okay, this is what Putin and the Iranian leadership under Raisi had to say. Russia and Iran are building momentum. Moscow and Tehran have developed strong ties over the past years and have boosted their respective economies, said Putin, telling to his Iranian counterpart Ibrahim Raisi. The Iranian president arrived to Moscow on a state visit Thursday. The two leaders discussed both bilateral ties and wider global challenges, including the conflict in Gaza. Russia and Iran had built good momentum over the years. Over the past year in particular, Putin told Raisi, pointing to cooperation, energy, and education. The states are also investing in railroads, which are destined to become part of the international north-south transport corridor, which, if you follow the work of Mr. Pepe Escobar, especially on this program, he has talked a lot about this as being a critical lifeline for independent development in the region, away from the U.S. and Europe's predatory tentacles. A network of sea, rail, and highway routes spanning 7,200 kilometers, this INSTC is designed to link Russia's city St. Petersburg on the Baltic Sea to Mumbai in India through the Caspian Sea and Iran. The project, the genesis of which dates back to 2002, involves 11 nations. None of them are the United States, by the way. The INSTC is intended to have the time needed to ship goods from the Baltic to India and double the cargo turnover on the route. It's expected to be twice as efficient as moving goods through the Suez Canal, according to some media reports, which, of course, Israel and the United States and, of course, the West would have a huge problem with, since that's the canal that they want to continue to exploit for regional domination. In May 2023, Moscow and Tehran signed an agreement on the construction of a railroad linking the Iranian cities of Astara, which has a port city in the Caspian Sea, and Rasht. It is the last remaining part of the railroad network of the corridor that still needs to be built, according to Russian media reports. According to Putin, bilateral trade between the two nations has already grown by 20% over the past year and reached $5 billion a route. We are engaging in active cooperation among the entire spectrum of our bilateral relations. Raisi hailed the two nations' progress in the fields of energy, agriculture, and education, but said that further steps could be made to deepen cooperation in all areas, which be in the interest of our states and our peoples. The Russian president expressed hopes for the Eurasian Economic Union, which includes Russia, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan, would be able to sign a free trade agreement with Iran by the end of the year. So this is interesting. It says that Putin poked fun that he considered landing in Tehran yesterday as he was flying over Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and he had to fly over Iran on the way back to Russia. He thought he could just land in Tehran and meet him right away, but according to Putin, he was informed that the Iranian president was already in the midst of catching his flight. Raisi responded by saying that Iran was ready to receive Putin's plane at any time and invited the president to visit Iran. Putin accepted the invitation and will avail himself to the opportunity when the time comes. Very friendly, very cordial, and huge and massive in terms of potential consequences. I mean, we're talking about a relationship between Russia and Iran that is going to build and is going to be part of building in an independent network of trade through this north-south corridor, which will bypass the United States and Europe's preferred way of dominating the region. That's a game changer, as Pepe Escobar often says here. So overall, what we are seeing Russia, we are seeing the Middle East, we're seeing the West Asia, we are seeing these two forces come together and begin the process, which still has a long way to go, but begin the process of extracting this predatory disease that is U.S. hegemony, that is Western domination, and relying on their own resources, their own political relationships, independent of U.S. meddling. This is a huge deal. This is what I mean by changing everything. Because when you have the Western mainstream media freaking out as they did, you know that regardless of how impactful the individual meetings and what comes out of them is, because all of these things take time, and of course whatever agreements come about are not necessarily going to bring fruits in the immediate sense, but you know that whatever comes out of that is secondary to the fact that Russia did this, Putin did this, and that these countries that were once staunch, not just staunch US allies, because I think that is a generous characterization. They were staunch US clients. They weren't allies. Allies means that you were on equal footing. These countries like the UAE, like Saudi Arabia, were staunch US clients. Yet Vladimir Putin and Russia, and of course China, as the Jerusalem Post couldn't help but cite, are big parts of helping facilitate a more sovereign and independent West Asia, one that will hopefully be more prepared as it becomes more economically and politically sovereign, more prepared to step up and step in when something like Gaza is going on. That's why I played that video too of Putin, because when Putin says these things about respecting international law, when he says these things that Russia's approach is much different than the United States's on this region, he's telling the truth, and that truth is reverberating across the region as even the most staunch U.S. clients. Iran, of course, is different. Iran was interested in BRICS well before these countries. Iran has been working with Russia and China deeply well before these countries began to even think about such a thing. Iran, of course, is a sovereign country in perpetual hybrid war because of its stance and position in politics. But nonetheless, the fact that you have U.S. clients so willing to not just welcome Putin, but to embrace Putin and to embrace Russia, and of course, we've seen the same with China, shows that this visit is part and parcel of a larger process of ending U.S. hegemony, ending U.S. militarism, ending the reign of U.S. dominance in this region, which also means we are closer to a situation where the people of Palestine and, of course, the people of the entire region are no longer terrorized by the Zionist entity as well. So all of this has huge consequences for the future of this region. And Vladimir Putin, in just a single day, really just 24 to 36 hours, has changed the calculus in this region, has exposed that Russia is not isolated and the world is no longer the US's to rule. Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.